Asher asa Hashem b'Mitzrayim. It's from yesterday's Chumash. It says, the Jewish people saw the great hand that Hashem made in Egypt. Strong hand. Vayiru ha'ames Havayah, and the people feared Hashem. Vayaminu ba'Hashem, and they believed in Hashem. Who Moshe Avdo, and Moshe his servant. You know that one?
So Torah or is what exactly?
What is Torah or?
Yeah,
It's the Alter Rebbe.
Oh, it's the Alter Rebbe. Ah.
And it's basically, it's the on the Parsha, it goes through the Parsha. Then there is the
Are there English translations?
they're coming out.
So would you say this is the first time that the entire nation, during that time of Moshe and slavery, completely agreed that God is with them and Moshe is the real deal?
Yeah, that's kind of what this pasuk is indicating. Yeah, the Jewish people saw the great hand that Hashem made in Mitzrayim. They feared Hashem and they believed in Moshe his servant.
And this is at what point? Before the sea?
This is
After.
this is
The
no
plagues.
this is like
They went through.
this is the words that come right before the words Azi Asher Moshe, right? You know, so the sea split basically.
Oh, already.
Yeah, that's what they saw.
Okay.
They walked through already? Or this is
Um,
Man,
It's pretty
something-
much it looks like they came around the other side already.
Yeah.
This was like this.
All of that?
Right
after
afterwards.
the Egyptians.
Right afterwards.
Yeah, this is like right before the Song of the Sea. So the Song of the Sea already is after they got through.
None of the
And they're-
plagues were convincing enough?
They rejoiced, seemingly not. Here it says they believed, they feared Hashem and they believed in Moshe his servant. Or I take it back. They feared Hashem and they believed in Hashem and Moshe his servant. That's going to come up here. So he says, Lahavin, Lama hikdim b'chinas yira l'b'chinas amuna. So you look at the pasuk clearly. It says they feared Hashem and they believed in Hashem. Why is that come fear before belief? Why is they feared Him and then they believed in Him? Hine kasiva yikar Havayah beis pamim. So he says to understand this, basically, when we read it, when we say every day the 13 attributes of mercy, we say Vayikra Havayah Havayah. We say 2 times the name Yud Kei Vav Kei right in a row, right? And then we say the 13 attributes of mercy. So what is that Havayah Havayah? Why twice? Because there's actually 2 levels of the name Havayah. There's not just one Havayah. Havayah is Yud Kei Vav Kei. Echad hu b'chinas shem Havayah de lasata. One of them is what we call the lower name Havayah. Hamahave kol ha'olamos ma'ayin liyesh. And its job, so to speak, is that it brings into existence all the worlds from nothing to something. Havayah comes from the word to be. It's a was, is, and will be inside of one word smushed together. And it means to bring being into existence. So the lower level of Havayah does that. It basically brings all the worlds into existence from nothing. Lahavin lashon me'ayin liyesh. What does it really mean from nothing to something? V'alo ksiv ki mimcha hakol. And doesn't it say elsewhere that everything comes from you? Meaning to say that, why saying from nothing to something? And it sounds like is it nothing or is it you? Right? So in other words, why saying literally comes from nothing? There's clearly you were there before it, so you should say it came from you to something. Ach bios. There's probably another sefer here. I would definitely think. No, there's one right there if you want. Use it. They'll have a look in there. We got to get you in these letters, man. I'm into the letters now. My son just turned 3, so there's a new mitzvah. You have to teach him the actual letters. You can't just talk anymore. You got to look inside.
We're still on the
Just
first
turned
Havayah?
What's that?
We're still on the first Havayah?
Yeah.
A few years.
Doesn't take.
Turned 3, so I can start studying.
See what I mean?
Act like 3.
Yodi wanted me to like
Wish I was 3.
Does it correspond to the Haya Hoveh V'yeh? To the Yeh part?
No, it's all that Havayah Hoveh V'yeh. All that together is one Havayah, the lower one.
Huh.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear the second one.
Yeah, I know. It's quite a suspense here. Okay.
Yodi wanted me to
Record the class or something?
Yeah. So what do you think about that? It's not. It's like a live stream it.
Yeah, go for it. You have it there?
Yeah.
Let's stream, baby.
A video?
It's like a live stream.
Is it video?
Yeah.
All right. So, better act quick because we're in the middle.
Okay.
So, okay. Basically, it works in our, and we have the internet access in here?
Let's see.
Live stream.
You don't have to have it live.
You're live. You are now live. But the thing is that there's nobody in the class right now.
Who are all these people then?
Advanced students.
No, I'm saying I'm saying
No one's receiving it.
no, I'm saying in the virtual classroom,
Oh,
not in the actual classroom.
Well, which one is which?
Still good practice for you.
This thing is
Right,
practice.
exactly. Wait, so all right, so basically we're saying why in this verse they feared Hashem and they believed in Hashem and Moshe's servant. Why does fear become before faith? One, and then what's this idea of two names Hashem? So we said the first Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei is the lower Hashem, and that enlivens all worlds from nothing to something. And we say, why is it called from nothing? It should say from you to something because it's not like there was nothing there. You were there before that. So the idea, okay, that's what we're holding. Ach bios ki mohuso va'atzmuso yisbarach ein lo shayches la'olamos ve'ein aruch elav klal. So, but since Hashem's real essence, it's a shame you have to just sit there and hold that.
I don't know what to
Doesn't
do.
it have a reverse thing?
What?
Doesn't it have a
What do you mean? Reverse
where
thing?
it'll doesn't have a way to turn it around so you should take your own picture
Yeah.
and then just lean it against the book looking at him. Yeah, now lean it against this book or something. So then it's got it.
I have to look at
And then
myself
put
now.
this
That's,
Yeah.
so it doesn't slip, you know what I
that's
mean?
quite the.
Prop it up here, and then put this like that so it doesn't slide.
So I got to look at that guy now the whole time.
See you.
Oh, look.
Wow, so handsome. What can I do? All right. Anyway,
Yeah. It's a good idea.
yeah, we're in. Should I go over here, or it doesn't matter?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
Actually.
All right. So anyway, since his essence, let's get back involved over here. Since Hashem's essence has no shaykhs to the worlds whatsoever, it's completely beyond the world. But ein aruch alav, and there's no comparison even. There's nothing like slightly in common or their link of uniting, intermediary. Nothing. There's just complete, finite and infinite. The two can't meet when it comes to Hashem's essence. L'chein bilti efshar la'olamos lekabel chayusa b'hishavusam. Therefore, it's impossible for the worlds to receive their life force and their existence. Ki im al yedei b'china shem Havayah baruch hu. Oh, it can only happen through the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. In other words, we can't receive our existence straight from God. It's too much to it's like plugging into straight into the nuclear power plant. It's too much. You're not going to be able to maintain your finite existence if you're coming straight from there. So he basically channels it through what's called the name Havayah, Baruch Hu, blessed be He. Hainu al yidei tzimtzum, and that really is another way of saying through contractions. Why? Why the Shem Havayah spells out a whole series of contractions. Shu bechinas yud, v'achar kach hispashtus v'zivo, v'oru bechinas hey. And what does it mean? It means it starts off with the yud, and we know that the yud is like this unbelievable level of contraction that everything that's infinite just disappears inside of like a little point. So that's the first job, and then the hey then takes that point and starts to expand it now in like a new dimension where everything's now sort of in a finite space. So now, but contracted, now it can start to expand, but not in the same version that was expanded before, because it was infinite expansion. Here, it takes everything now from a finite space and starts to expand finitely into sort of lines of length, width, and depth, and so forth. Like it starts to elucidate from a finite perspective.
did you say it's the only way? That's the only way that Hashem comes down to this world is through this name?
Yes.
And what about Elohim when he
Elohim is basically yet a further,
expansion of that?
not expansion, but actually contraction. In other words, even the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is ultimately too much for the worlds to handle. So that's stage one of his contracting himself. And then, when it comes down to it, that whole name itself has to be hidden inside of another name in order to actually create worlds.
Is there any correspondence with the 10 spheres? Like,
Yeah. Big time. Yeah, the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is 4 letters, but those 4 letters basically, they actually do expand into the 10 spheros. So the 10 spheros have 4 quadrants to them. Really, there's 10, you divide them into 4 quadrants, and those quadrants are this name. So basically, it's a very similar thing to say that he, instead of saying the name, you could say that he uses the 10 spheres in order to make this transition from essence of God to the worlds. And similarly to your point, even when he makes the 10 spheros, that doesn't really make finite worlds yet. You need to put a name Elohim on top of that before that can even translate into worlds that of the creation. Because the first one is not really a creation, as we know. It's sort of like it's him in a form of 10 spheros, but it's not something other than him yet. So then to go to the worlds, it's like a level of Elohim. So the only way to do it is to go through this name. So Yud is the contraction, and afterwards there's the Hey, which is the expansion of the Ray into a state of Hey, which is the idea of 3 lines, length, width, and depth. And regarding this, it says that he commanded, and they came into being. Then they were created. V'hu kai al shem Havayah. So it says he commanded v'nivra'u, and they were created. Who the one who's commanded refers to the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. How do you know? To ksiv le'el minei yahalu Hashem Havayah. Because right before it says hu tziva v'nivra'u, it says you shall praise the name Havayah. So it says you shall praise the name Havayah. He commanded, and they came to be created. So the he that it's referring to is not Hashem; it's the name of Hashem.
Huh, that's interesting.
Right?
Sounds good. Okay.
V'shem Hashem hu tziva lashon his kashrus. And the idea is that when it says hu tziva, he tziva. What does the word tziva mean? It means commanded. What does the word commandment in general mean? A mitzvah is tam tzeva chibur. It means to connect 2 things. That's what the actual word mitzvah means. It's interesting. Mitzvah is also mem tzadik vav he, which is 2 of these letters are anyway similar to Yud Kei Vav Kei. And here's an interesting thing: is that in Atbash, which is where you basically reverse the letters, Aleph becomes a Saf. Then Mem Tzadik is Yud Kei.
Wow.
So mitzvah is actually just another way of saying Yud Kei Vav Kei, like in a slightly different variation.
So Yud and Mem are the opposite.
Yeah.
Isn't the word Svat also has to be in there? Svat mitzvah?
Tzfat is also in Atbash. It's Eva, which means dwelling place for Hashem. Anyway, so what he's saying here is that Hu Tziva, he commanded. Another way of reading that is Yud Kei Vav Kei joined, right? Is Lashon his kasher is connected, right? And so he's saying, okay, v'nivra'u. So Hu Tziva v'nivra'u. Let's kind of follow the whole logic here. Hu Tziva v'nivra'u. So it says he connected, and then v'nivra'u. They were created. Lashon nifal, and they were created is like a passive thing, not an active thing. It doesn't say he created, or they. It says they were created, like sort of automatically. Something happened to them that suddenly they were all there. As soon as he connected himself with the Yud Kei Vav Kei, as soon as Hashem basically brought himself down into just merely this name and this contracted version, then nivra'u, they came out sort of automatically by themselves, like suddenly there was the existence. That's what it means yesh ma'ayin. Like it happened like in the entire host of heavens, like instantaneously came into existence as soon as he connected himself with his name.
I hope I don't regret saying this, but it kind of sounds like Big Bang, because you spoke about a little fine point and then a big expansion, almost like a supernova, but on a much higher level.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, not that the Big Bang is how we got here. I always thought that if any of that was true, it was a tool that God used to create.
Okay. Well, everything that happens in this, like, physical creation is like is rooted in what happens in the spiritual realm. So the fact is that it's true that everything was created from a single point, and that's why they just realized that that's also true when it comes to creation. In other words, it's not. It is like it's a tool of HaShem. That's the tool that we're explaining right now. In terms of like their, version of like the time, let's say, that it took in order for that process to happen or whatever, that's maybe a little bit contested. But the whole concept that everything comes out of oneness is true. That was a good find on their part. That's how it happened. So anyway, so the idea, okay, v'hine kamo shebechines zu tzrich lios tzimtzum v'hispashtus bechines shem Havayah. So just like in this level, in order for the creations, nivra'u, for the actual creations, the nivroim, which means like separate beings, to come suddenly into existence from nothing, it required HaShem to connect himself to this realm of contraction and expansion. In other words, that's associated with the Shem Havayah, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Kein yesh b'chinas Shem Havayah Dila'ela. So too, there is what we call the Shem Havayah Dila'ela, the higher name Havayah. All that is the lower name Havayah that Hashem had to contract himself into in order to make the beings. But in that whole process of Yud Kei Vav Kei, contraction, expansion, etc., that is also happened on a higher plane. Gam kein Yud b'chinas tzimtzum. There was also a Yud to contract the light and etc. V'hu b'chinas ratzon al machshav lios Havayah dilasata. And this is the idea of the will, right? That it went up in his mind that there should be the lower Havayah. In other words, what's the higher Havayah? It's like a pre-stage to the lower Havayah. That in order for there to be the lower Havayah, there had to be a will for that to happen. Right? It didn't just happen out of nowhere. Hashem had to desire for that whole process of Yud Kei Vav Kei to take place. And therefore, in the realm of that desire itself, there was a whole process of Yud Kei Vav Kei. There's sort of like the action, and there's the intention that preceded that action. So each one of those is like a whole system of contraction and expansion. So to get to the lower Havayah, there had to be a previous Havayah. It is that it went up in his will that there should be a lower Havayah. Liosa olamos, that there should be worlds, kamola mashal ba'adam. Just like, for example, let's give it a mashal, like a person, shekodem shahotzi malachto mikoach el hapoel, that before you bring out your actual work from potential to actual, you want to build a chair, before you actually make it happen, that there's a chair there from the fact that we just have a potential chair inside of you. So the whole thing first had to be formed in his mind exactly what to do. So there's the actual process of building it one step after the next. But before that all takes place, that whole process exists in a pre-state inside of his mind, inside of his will, his thought. Exactly what to do. And the whole thing has to follow the exact model. At first there has to be a contraction of the idea and then an expansion. In other words, the whole exact process that you're going to bring out in actuality takes place, letter for letter in the pre-state. And this previous level of Havayah is called the hidden world. Because it's not seen and revealed like the lower world. When you bring out the lower Havayah, every time you basically do something, it's shown. It's an actual action, it's an activity, and slowly you build your project. So each one of the stages is like a thing that takes place. But this, none of it actually takes place. It's all like a precursor to this one, so it's called the hidden world, because it all happens in a place which is beyond expression. Amar Paro, and therefore Paro said, Mihu Hashem, who is this Hashem? You're talking about Yud Kei Vav Kei? He's like, who is God? He said, who is the Yud Kei Vav Kei? Shlo Amin He didn't believe in this concept. There's a precursor to the Shem Havayah. In other words, already the idea that existence comes out from nowhere is already a pretty deep concept, You're basically saying that this whole thing sort of got here, just expressed from basically nothing, that it has sort of like an underlying energy that you can't see, that Hashem enlivens it. But the fact that that underlying energy that you can't see itself is enlivened by a deeper underlying energy that you can't see, it's not so apparent to the eye. It's like, in other words, I can see there's like sort of the laws of nature. There's an underlying intellectual process and intelligence behind this world. It's like you can see that in the world to a certain degree. But to already say that itself has a precursor, and there's a whole like realm of intelligence that was required in order to get that secret intelligence, it's not readily available. So Moshe is coming and saying, introducing this new state of divinity that's like beyond comprehension. And Paro said, "Who's this that you're talking about? I don't know that guy." He didn't believe that because that requires belief. He didn't believe that such a state existed. He says, and this is interesting, because when it says when Paro says, "Who is Havayah?" certainly, the Alter Rebbe says, like with just confidence, certainly he knew about the lower name of Havayah. That was not in question. The lower name Yud Kei Vav Kei, of course he knew, right? Because that's bringing the worlds into existence. And like even this whole idea of like atheism, Paro was not an atheist. In other words, of course there's an underlying and energetic force that's enlivening everything. How did it get here? That's for sure.
Paro knew that he didn't create the world.
It's interesting. I mean, he did have this concept that like he was a god and he created himself.
Okay, but he knew because you look in the mirror and you say, "I didn't make the Nile. It was there when I got here."
Okay, he did like delude himself. But the point is that if you want to get to it, they say even the goyim, the idol worshippers, even though they may think they are gods, they believe in something called Elokad de Elokaya. They believe that there's a God of gods. So you're right. In other words, you're right. Even if he's going to say, "I'm like made myself, I'm like all powerful," he'll recognize that in order to get to that state, something had to happen before him, and someone had to make him and give him that power. But once this is like where their mistake comes in, is that once Hashem made these powerful things, like they have independent power of their own. So that's this, but they do believe in like sort of like a Havayah force that like is underlying everything. It's interesting. Anyway, the way the Alter Rebbe says is certainly the lower name Yud Kei Vav Kei, which enlivens all of existence, for sure that he knew about. It's interesting. And B'Yetzias Mitzrayim, yeah. Just thinking like we're kind of going quickly, but what does it mean like the lower name of Havayah? So if you think about a creation, an entity in this world, the fact that it's got two things. It's got like light and vessel, right? The fact that it has a certain shape and a color and like a physical form to it. That's sort of like its external shell, like that it is a creation. But the fact that could come out of God's essence, it required first for him to sort of have like a miniature version of God, if you will, where his energy had even relevance to be expressing itself in a finite form, right? Because Hashem's essence as it is, it's like if it would show itself infinitely, and it would not have the ability to basically crawl inside of a finite object to enliven it. So the whole idea of the Shem Havayah, Yud Kei Vav Kei, is basically Hashem's process of making himself have finite lights and like bring himself down into a minimized sort of condensed, calmer form of energy, so that it could go inside of finite objects, and they would not go out of their keli basically and like lose themselves because they're being touched by the hand of God. So this is the idea that you can basically see that if you're sensitive to the small degree, you realize that the thing didn't create itself, as you said, right? So it's godliness, and for sure, in order for there to be godliness had to sort of contract himself into creation. In other words, you can sort of recognize that godliness could stay in an expanded state, where it's not making creation. But once there's a creation, godliness is in a contracted state, and that's basically as much godliness as he thought there was. That yes, there's an underlying contracted force be inside of everything. But that's what it is. That's all there is. There's the thing, and there's the underlying contracted force that's inside the thing, and that's God, basically. Beyond that, no. So Moshe's coming and saying, there's something that even preceded this underlying contracting force, and it had to contract itself tremendously even to just get to that point. And that's this idea of like the thought or the will that precedes the actual energy inside the thing. When it comes into being already, you can point behind the being and saying clearly there's an energy inside of it. All right, whatever, maybe that didn't help. But anyway, that's what we're holding.
Did Abraham prove that?
Prove what exactly?
That there was a higher source where all the highest divinity comes, and there's a person that is supreme, and he tried to say there was one God, not just a higher realm of, or is that something different?
Well, even Abraham, it says that basically Hashem appeared to him with the name Kel Shakai, and the name Havayah he did not make known to him, you know? So we're talking about Moshe came with some like new thing that like no one brought to the world. Maybe you could say Abraham showed to everyone that there was there was an underlying unifying factor behind all things, you know, and that each thing wasn't just independent. I'm not sure if Paro knew about what Abraham taught either, but nonetheless, there's definitely something new here. Anyway, Yitzias,
there had to be some level of wisdom connection for not this Paro, but the Paro that said, "This prisoner who told me my dream, I'm making him king of my nation."
right?
That was a wise Paro.
Yeah.
You make it sound like this lower Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is like a protective bubble or dimension to protect us from God's glory, or
Yeah,
so
basically,
we
yeah.
have the possibility of existing
Yeah.
whilst I don't
Still
know,
being
the
enlivened by
word
Him.
is God exists, but you know,
Yeah.
whilst God exists, because it's beyond like anything I can comprehend. But
That's kind of what it is, yeah. It's like to be like an intermediary so that infinity can funnel itself into and create the finite, the creation. That's what this name is, the lower name. Ubiyitzias Mitzrayim kasiv v'yar Yisrael hayad hagedol asher asa Havayah b'Mitzrayim. When they came out of Egypt, it's written the Jewish people saw the great hand that Hashem made in Mitzrayim. Perush asher asa Havayah dile'ela al yidei b'chinas Mitzrayim. So read that sentence closely. It says that people saw the great hand that Havayah made. What is Havayah made there? That the higher Havayah. They saw the higher Havayah, basically, right? And suddenly that came clear to them at the time of going out of Egypt. Like this level, which is an unseen level, became clear to them. How? B'Mitzrayim. They saw what Hashem made in Mitzrayim. The other way, the way he's reading it is that they saw the higher Havayah because of Mitzrayim, because of what happened to Mitzrayim. Meaning what? Ad lo salik be nahora, a piece of wood that doesn't light well. How do you get it to light well? You smash it into little pieces. Right? So the idea is that the smashing of Mitzrayim into little pieces made the light burn brighter and suddenly be able to be seen. Ki bilti afshar because you can't reach or ever get a glimpse of this higher Havayah. It's interesting. Only by what we call the level of turning from evil. In other words, the idea of, denying the dark forces, which is basically called destroying Mitzrayim, what we call iskafia, like subjugation. That is the unique tool if you want to get to be able to see the higher level of Havayah. I mean, starting with subjugation for sure, but yeah, Surah Meirah is like turning from evil. And what is that? It's called bittling, right? Nullifying yourself, contracting yourself. In other words, when Hashem does it to Mitzrayim, He's like destroying them into little bits. But how do you do it? It says if the body doesn't allow the soul's light to shine. So this is an analogy. If a piece of wood doesn't allow the fire to come out, you smash it into little pieces. So too, if the body is not allowing the soul to shine, you also smash it into little pieces.
Talmud.
What's that?
Talmud.
Tabas, yeah. Like in other words, if you're just like lost in your geschmack of olam hazeh, of this world, the way to do it is to contain yourself, like you said, subjugate yourself, sort of nullify yourself. So that process right there is the secret way to reveal the higher level of Havayah. And it's called the Lav Kodim Lahain, the no that comes before the yes. In other words, in order to, if you want to build a new palace, the first thing you have to do is knock down the old palace. There's like a sort of negation property that has to happen before you take a positive step. You have to turn away from evil. That's what the pasuk says. Sur meira ba'asei tov. Turn from evil and then do good. Because you can't, if you're in the midst of doing evil, you can't do good at the same time. The first thing you have to do is remove the evil, and then you have a clean place to do the good.
That's emptying out the vessel so you can receive.
Right, and exactly that's like what we're learning in the Mimer the whole last couple of weeks, and that's the idea of contracting yourself, bittling yourself. This is the answer to drawing forth the higher level of Havayah. And it's very, very similar to what we said in the Mimer that we just read in Basi Lagani, that if you want to make Hashem's Yud come out, and if you want to bring forth His name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, you have to sort of make yourself into a Yud first. And that's the idea of you make the contraction, and that creates a reciprocal, that He's willing to contract Himself into this will to make you. Right? Because we're saying that there has to be this previous will that Hashem has to decide even through a stage of Yud Kei Vav Kei to even actually make the actual Yud Kei Vav Kei come out, which makes reality. So we're talking about triggering in like his thought process to start. And his thought process starts with a Yud. And then it goes to a Hey, and then a Vav, and then a Hey. And that thought process, once it's all fully revealed, then now the thought is in place, it can actually start creating the Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the actual energy enlivening the world. So we're saying that there's two parts to this thing. So in order for you to begin the whole process of Hashem contracting His infinity inside of a Yud and beginning the process of like willing you into creation, you have to make yourself into a Yud, contract yourself and bittul yourself.
But where did the Israelites do that? I thought.
Well, here what we're saying is Hashem sort of like maybe triggered this process to begin with at first. In other words, we didn't even know such a thing existed. He had to sort of show us the way. So they saw in Mitzrayim, they saw like when the evil forces will be choked and starved, then all of a sudden you can see the Shem Havayah. You're right. And like maybe you could say like in the very first place when Hashem first revealed this thing, He had to do it for us because we didn't have like
From above as opposed from below.
which is like an unusual thing, right? Maybe that was like the first time it had to happen like that, just so we could give us like the. There were certain things that we did. We followed the mitzvah, and we painted the blood on our door. We ate the Paschal lamb, and we made the matzahs. We did like a certain minimal level of avoda to just at least like trigger something. But you're right. In general, the real service of the Jew didn't really start until after Matan Torah.
But only 20% of us did that.
Right.
Okay.
And maybe 20% of the Mitzrayim also did it. They came out with us.
Okay.
Were you saying
That
that?
didn't turn out good.
Whatever. They for them, what did they have to do to go out and become part of our nation? Maybe a bigger leap.
Were they really a part of our nation? Were they like what they call Erev Rav? Or
The Erev Rav.
So they weren't exactly
Troublemakers.
true believers.
Troublemakers.
Are we saying that they destroyed the Egyptians for the Egyptians' benefit, or like they smashed them?
No. V'yar Yisrael.
For our
Sayad
benefit?
Agadola. Asher asa Hashem b'Mitzrayim. The Jewish people saw the great hand that Hashem made. It was like for us to see, basically. We recognize suddenly this higher level of Havayah.
But we recognize higher level by in the Egyptians when they smashed them.
No, by their being smashed. And as we saw, the only way you can see this higher level is in the realm of sort of turning from evil. When evil is like undone, when there's like a subjugation of evil, whether it's done by us, whether it's done by Hashem, that's when you get a glimpse of this higher level of things. It doesn't show itself in positive acts. It shows itself in refraining types of acts. There's this whole concept. He's going to say it in the next line. Yud Ke im Shmi is Shasa, right? So he says, basically, remember we learned a couple days ago, or Miksa, I don't remember, but he says, Zeh Shmi Liolam V'zeh Zichri L'dor Dor. The Parshas ended with the words, this is my name forever, and this is my remembrance for all generations. My name, my remembrance, basically God's name, and the remembrance is like how you mention it, my mentioning. And we said the word Shmi is the gematria of 350. Right? Mm-hmm. And if you add Yud K to it, it comes out to 365. Remember this? The name Zichri, which also means Hashem's name, I'm mentioning the way I'm remembered, the way I'm said, is 239, 30 something. And if you add Yud K, Vav K to it, 11 to it, it comes out with 248, right? 237, right? And you add 11 to it, which is Vav K, it comes out to 248. What do we see from here? That if you add Yud K, which is a higher part of Hashem's name, to a number, it equals the negative mitzvahs. Okay. If you add Vav K to a number, it comes out to the positive mitzvahs. That's what's higher, Yud K or Vav K? Yud K. So what does it mean? That the negative mitzvahs are higher than the positive mitzvahs. That's the point that we're trying to get out of this. Right? The negative mitzvahs are higher than the positive mitzvahs. Because although that while you do a positive mitzvah, you make like a kli in this world for Hashem to sort of come down into. Whenever you do a mitzvah, you draw down Hashem into the world. True. But the fact that there's a positive action that you do in order to make it happen means that it's something that you have access to. In other words, it's a certain level of light which has already contracted itself to the point and become minimized to the point that you can grasp it. And what's the proof? You'll set up a little mitzvah and you can make it come down. Which means there's already a level of godliness that has contracted itself to the point that it is sort of summoned by human grasp. So it's already a lower level of godliness. Positive mitzvahs, you get up and do something, it means that it's great, you can draw down godliness, but the proof that you can draw down this godliness means that it's a lower level of godliness that you have access to. So the higher level of godliness, which is completely beyond the grasp of man, the only way to grasp it is to not do anything. Because it's showing that like you're well that's subjugation, is I'm going to not right now. It's not I'm going to do. So it shows that you're accessing something which is beyond your grasp. And the only way to access that with, so to speak, your grasp is to not do something. So the subjugation, the holding back of yourself, as opposed to the expansion of yourself and the expression of yourself by doing something, accesses the higher level. And that's the idea. Like if you want to say that, the lower level of Hashem is like a graspable one that's clear and recognizable in the world. It's like you do something and you can see the result of your actions. That's like Hashem mamish putting his energy into the world. But the fact that he can put it into the world is a sign that it's low enough and contracted enough that it can actually be entering into the world and sort of be that underlying energy that's inside of everything. The fact that it's actually inside of everything and you can like say, I'm sort of holding it in my hand as I hold this cup, even though it's the underlying energetic force inside of it, it's still already contracted enough that I can even talk about the fact that it's in my hand, right? So the level which creates that level, in other words, the divine energy which makes it so that this divine energy can even exist, is like a thought level of energy. It doesn't actually come into the cup in a graspable way. It's in everything, but it's in everything in a way where it's completely beyond grasp. And that's why Paro was like, what are you talking about? He's talking about some spiritual thing. He had no idea what he was talking about. And the way to see that and make it come out and show itself is not by doing something, it's by not doing something. Because you're like sort of accessing the negation, the unknown levels of divinity. So that's why Hashem showed it by it's like destroying Paro, by subjugating Klippa. Suddenly, this higher level became apparent into the world. You seeing? Okay. See the idea there? Yeah, that's a good one. There it is. And there's a lot of things, like I was just learning a mimer last night, actually, Dafka on Parshas Beshalach, we learned a little bit about the third meal, you know? The third meal, we say we don't eat bread at the third meal, right? And there's like, and why? Because that's all comes from this week's Parsha. It's interesting. It says that, even though it says the word Hayom 3 times in one pasuk, and from there we learn the obligation of eating 3 meals on Shabbos, so there's definitely such a thing as the third meal, but the third time it says the word Hayom, it says Hayom Lo. It adds like this negation quality to it. And the idea spiritually is that at that third meal time of Shabbos, this level that we're talking about right now becomes suddenly available. Like in other words, it can be accessed. So the way to access it is not to eat the meal, it's to not eat the meal, right?
To not eat the meal or not eat the bread?
Not eat bread, but we do eat something. Because it's like we're recognizing that it's there, but the way that we recognize is to subdue ourselves in some aspect of that meal. Yeah, like you're holding back. And so suddenly you get an access of the light that is unseeable. And the only way to grasp it is to not do something, not to do something.
If I didn't eat anything?
Huh?
If I didn't eat anything for third meal?
Okay, so I mean, that's the custom is that there is a concept of not eating anything, but that's not the highest, because the truth is to give it some. Here, it's very deep, but you're just like throwing that out there. But the reason why we do eat something is because ultimately, being in a state of nothing, like accessing that state of nothing, it also wants to have a form that the nothing can actually simultaneously express itself into something. It's like two opposites. On one hand, each one has a positive quality the other one doesn't have. The idea of doing something and be able to do a positive mitzvah in order to like actually grasp it and have the power to bring it down is awesome. It's like you can like summon the HaShem with your actions is an amazing thing. It's just the problem is, since we're finite, it's the only thing we're able to summon with such an action is a finite level of God. So there's a limitation. There's something positive, but there's also a drawback. So when you want to not do something, the positive is you get to a higher level, but you can't really access that in a way that it can be seen and brought out. You can do something and like bring it down by a positive action. So the idea that you eat something but not bread is that it's a kind of a combination of both. Is that you're accessing the level of the nothing, but simultaneously you're doing an action and, like, so to speak, drawing that level of the nothing down into a positive expression. So we do eat something. It's even for like a higher reason. But theoretically, up until what we said till now, you're right. Like, you wouldn't eat anything if you want to really bring it out. But there's even a higher level where you can have it and bring it out at the same time. It's like sort of a fusion of opposites.
Does it have anything to do with arousing the appetite, like eating something small and then battling that whole?
No, that's not like Shabbos custom. Like Shabbos is like there's no like battle in that way. It's more like we're enjoying Hashem's, as opposed to like holding ourselves back in general. That's why it's a meal, theoretically you just wouldn't eat anything if you
if you didn't eat anything, it could appear that you forgot that you should have a meal.
Right. You're not like,
it could be laziness.
You're not honoring the space of the third meal,
For me, I would definitely notice that I'm not eating.
Okay, so all right, so let's see. We're going to run out of time here. Let's just finish this little chapter. We'll finish this. I guess tomorrow. So with this arousal from below, that you contract yourself, and that you have this negation that you apply to yourself. To turn from evil. It's exactly what we just said a minute ago. You make the yud. In other words, when you make yourself into a yud, you simultaneously make Hashem turn into. He allows himself to turn into a yud. And a yud is basically his entry point into making the yud kei vav kei, the higher yud kei vav kei. In other words, the higher yud kei vav kei does not come out and express itself unless you sort of build it. And the way you build it is by holding yourself back. So therefore Hashem holds himself back and contracts the infinity into a tiny little yud. And that's the beginning. That for him is contraction. For us, that's the beginning of revealing this higher space.
So Yud K, the subjugation of the higher part of the name. Yud K is the higher part of the name, right?
Yeah.
Subjugation.
And that comes from subjugation.
Right.
But we're saying here is like a little detail in addition to that. We're saying you can reveal it, right? So how do you reveal it? You do reveal it by an action, but a negative action. So when you make your negative action, right, Hashem makes his negative action. What's his negative action? Even to get to Yud Kei Vav Kei, to the higher one. For him, that's also a huge contraction. For him to like express himself into his thought is still like a big downward move for him as far as where he would be if he wasn't expressing himself into that thought. For us, it's like a wondrous revelation of something beyond his deed. It's his thought, but for him, it's a down. So in order for him to come down and agree to contract himself into a yud, we have to contract ourselves into a yud. V'asei tov shu b'chinas hispashtus k'mo b'chinas tzedakah nas le'el b'chinas hey hu b'chinas hispashtus. So that's just the yud. But then if you want that yud to now be able to be really seen, then you have to, yes, do a positive thing. This is sort of like the eating part, right, of that meal. So he kind of gets into it. In other words, it says sur meira v'asei tov, turn from evil and then do good. What's the doing good now? Now you've bittled yourself. Now when you enter into the idea of doing the positive mitzvah, giving tzedakah, like extend, so you can now start to bring that yud, which is really just like a Hashem's willingness to contract himself. You can start to draw it down into the hay, right, and basically bring it down into a way that it can start to come even lower. Draw down into the hay is an expansion of that yud. So you can't, if you just like start giving tzedakah without the contraction, I guess the idea is that you're not doing it because it's a mitzvah, you're not doing it like as a subjugation part. And then in every mitzvah, I guess, there's this notion of contracting yourself and bitteling yourself in order to do the mitzvah from the right perspective.
Can you give an example with the tzedakah thing?
So in other words, you could, yeah, it says, for example, chesed de umos chatas. It's kind of like a, not necessarily the way we'd want to go off with a bang with our first publication to the world, but it says in Tanya that even the chesed of the nations is a sin, right? And it's just because basically there's this idea that you can be a big shot also when you give. In other words, giving can be like an act of arrogance to a certain degree, So giving because like you have a lot more than you need for yourself, and then you just like kind of want to like pride yourself in the fact that you're sort of a generous person. That's not a sacrifice. Well, our mitzvahs are called a sacrifice. When you give to the point that it hurts, that's mamash. That's where the bittul, the self-nullification, precedes the good deed, and therefore the good deed is actually drawing forth that bittul version, that yud, into a hay. It's like bringing it to more of expansion. If there's no self-nullification, there's no sacrifice that takes place beforehand, you're just sort of coming from the klippas, even though it could look like it's a nicer thing than killing someone. But in its essential spiritual level, it's kind of the same thing. There's no selflessness involved. It's just like expansion of ego.
I thought the opportunity doesn't present itself unless you did the mitzvah of not doing anything.
Right. So no, you're right. I mean, he kind of.
And then a mitzvah is still a mitzvah, and it's just a question of what level you're on when you do it. No.
Yeah, I think he definitely sort of is. He's saying that the way we build the Yud Kei Vav Kei Vav, it's not only, it's like, he's talking about the Yud Kei Vav Kei itself has two levels. If you want the Yud, which is like a higher level of it, that's with holding yourself back. And now you're going to sort of bring out the lower levels of Yud Kei Vav Kei, i.e. the Hey, so that's already, you don't have to go to this level of contraction, now you have to go to a level of expansion. Maybe it's a lower aspect of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei than the Yud is. So in other words, you're not reaching as high, so to speak, when you do the tzedakah as when you do the holding back, but you want to reveal the full nature of HaShem, which requires both, like the negative space and the positive space. Okay, Bekitzer, we'll hold here for now, and keep it rolling. So let's talk to him now, maybe.